Hey everyone, Sam here. Thanks for joining me. I hope you're having a beautiful day wherever you are in the world. In this video I'm going to show you how to paint clouds, mountains and water in this painting, which features Cecil Peak, which is just across the water from the town of Queenstown in southern New Zealand. Now I'll also give you some specific tips on mixing some of those colours that are found in the clouds, mountains and the water. Now before I start the video, I'd just like to quickly tell you about Portfolio Box. If you're an artist or creative and you're looking to make your own website, then check out portfoliobox.net. It's an online website builder that allows you to create your own beautiful website to showcase your work to the highest standard. And it's really easy to use. You don't need to know how to code. It all works through drop and drag, and there's lots of different styles and templates for you to choose from. You can start building your website right away, and then when you want it to go live, simply choose the plan that you wish to purchase. Now right now, Portfolio Box are offering a 50% discount on any plan for the first year simply by typing in the discount code SAMERP50, and I've put the link and the discount code in the description box below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Get your paints ready and let's roll the tape. The inspiration for this painting comes from the mountains surrounding Lake Wakatipu in southern New Zealand, and this is where the town of Queenstown is located, a place that I lived in for over 3 years. I've always been in awe of the beauty of these mountains, but I've often found them tricky to paint purely from a composition perspective. The mountains themselves have lots of cool shapes, and there's other cool features that I could add in, such as trees and rocks and things like that. But they're always in different places and not all together, so trying to fit them in a scene is tricky. However, the other week I was sifting through my photo reference and saw some of the many photos I've taken of Cecil Peak here. And then I came across these photos with the rocks in the foreground, and I thought, maybe I can use the rocks to lead the eye towards Cecil Peak. So I thought I'd paint this scene. I'm painting on a 20cm by 33cm linen panel which I made myself. It's just oil primed linen that I've glued to marine plywood. Now the reason it's such a weird shape is because I've got a load of odd sized frames kicking around the studio that I've picked up from framers and charity shops, so I'm trying to fill some of them up. This slightly longer landscape is going to allow me to comfortably fit Cecil Peak in the painting. Now, as I said before, from a composition perspective, I've used the rocks here to lead the eye into the scene. I've toned the linen surface with a layer of burnt umber, which just helps to warm up the painting. Now, as a lot of the colours in this scene aren't especially vibrant, and the fact that there's a lot of low chroma colours, especially in the mountains and the rocks, I haven't used that many colours. Now chroma is another word for saturation. So the colours that I used in this painting include titanium white, burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow oxide, quinacridone magenta, ultramarine blue and cobalt teal. And I begin sketching out my composition using burnt sienna and a number 1 round brush. I've mixed the burnt sienna with liquin because as I'm using oil paint, liquin speeds up the drying time. Whenever I begin a painting, I always identify where my dark values and shadows are first, and value refers to how dark or light a subject is. So in this painting we've got 3 main areas of shadow. We've got shadows in the clouds, in the mountains and in the rocks in the foreground. So I start by painting those cloud shadows, and I'm keeping my colour mixtures simple, and here I'm using ultramarine blue with some burnt sienna and then some titanium white to make the value of the colour lighter. Burnt sienna is actually a dark orange, so orange being opposite to blue, when the two are combined they cancel each other out. So then if we introduce titanium white with these two colours, it means we can create some really nice neutral greys. Now in general for clouds I shift the mixture on the blue side so that the colours don't look muddy. Now I use these same two colours for the mountain shadows, only with a lot less titanium white, and I can even introduce a little bit of quinacridone magenta to the mix just to give it a violet tint. As we come forward in the landscape, those shadows are going to be getting darker, as we'll find our darkest darks and our lightest lights in the foreground, whereas in the distance darks aren't as dark and lights are not as light. So for these rock shadows in the foreground, I've literally just mixed ultramarine blue with burnt sienna and it's created a near black. Now once I've marked in where my shadows are, I go back to the sky and clouds, the furthest zone away in the painting, and I start painting those cloud highlights. And here I've mixed titanium white with some burnt sienna and it just gives the white a nice orange glow to it. It also combines well with the cloud shadows as I've already used these colours in the mix. I'm applying the paint with a number 5 flat brush, and this is a really good brush to use for painting clouds as you can get some nice gestural marks with them, and also good for blending. I next paint the sky, and skies are some of the lighter values you'll find in the landscape. And this is a mix of ultramarine blue with cobalt teal and titanium white, and I've made sure to keep the value light. The sky mix is also going to help me fill in some of those negative spaces around the clouds, which is going to add more definition to them. Next I start painting the areas in light on Cecil Peak. Now the grass and vegetation on this mountain is naturally low in chroma. There's a lot of tussock grass, especially in the upper section of the mountain, which is kind of a golden straw colour. There's more greenery in the lower section of the mountain, but it's very pale and light in value, so we're going to be using low chroma colours here. I've mainly been using combinations of yellow oxide with ultramarine blue, titanium white to make the value lighter, and then I've been using quinacridone magenta just to adjust the colours to give some of that mountain grass a rusty undertone. Quinacridone magenta is a brilliant bluish red, so red being opposite to green on the colour wheel, these two cancel each other out and it can be used to desaturate a green. Now I've shifted the hue of the green slightly in the lower section of the mountain by introducing some cobalt teal into my mix, which just gives it a few subtle emerald tones within there. When it comes to painting the water, I start off by painting some of those small waves and ripples. Now it can get pretty windy across this lake and the water can become very choppy, so we can get some wave effects in the foreshore, although this is just a lake and it's not tidal at all. But it's going to add interest to the painting. So I start by mixing ultramarine blue with some yellow oxide and a little cobalt teal to paint some of these shadow areas in these waves. And a lot of these waves I just sort of think of them as hills with the light coming from behind them. I'm then able to use the same colour combination but then with some titanium white mixed in to paint the main areas of the lake, and this is mostly reflecting the sky and the mountains. So in some cases I shift the colour more on the blue side and some more on the green side. I paint around these main waves, but I'm going to be coming back to them later on in the painting. Once I've painted in the water, I then move on to those rocks in the foreground. Now I already painted those shadows, so it's just the areas that are in light, but there's actually quite a lot going on within these rocks. Some of them are jagged and some of them are smooth. Some of them are wet and are reflecting the light and also the sky as well, so this needs to be reflected in the rocks. In general, I'm going to make them look like they're wet rocks. For the rocks, I've used a couple of different colours here. I've used a mix of ultramarine blue, burnt sienna and titanium white. But for some of those rocks, I've also used burnt umber mixed with titanium white, as burnt umber is actually a very dark yellow, and you can see its yellow undertone when you mix in titanium white with it. Now in other areas of these rocks I've mixed in a little bit of yellow oxide and even quinacridone magenta in places. When I'm painting the rock surfaces I split them up into zones. So the areas in shadow, then the areas of the rock surfaces that are in the sunlight, and then also the areas of these rocks that are wet, that are reflecting not only the direct sunlight but the sky. Following this, I paint some of the white water where these waves are breaking on the shore, and this is a mix of titanium white with a little ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, because I want to make the value a little darker so that when I apply my lightest values at the end of the painting, it should make that water come alive. I finish up the blocking in stage by restating some of these dark areas in the painting and adding some more waves and ripples in the lake. Once I've finished the blocking in stage, I allow the painting to dry and then I can start adding details to it. Once the painting was dry, I start back with the furthest zone in the painting, and that's the sky and clouds. And I start adding more highlights to the clouds, and this is what's going to help give it the definition. So I'm still using titanium white with some burnt sienna, and I just mark in where the lightest areas are. I'm then able to start adding cloud shadows and using the same colour mixes that I was using in the blocking in stage, but also blend them in with some of those cloud highlights. And I spend time just working the shapes of the clouds. Following that, I can then use my sky mix to further define the clouds, filling in the negative spaces around them. This takes a little bit of time, and my brushes that I'm using are now a little smaller. I'm using a number 3 Filbert brush, which is a really useful brush in landscape painting because you can use the rounded edge for finer detail and then the broad end of the brush for more gestural marks. I work on those mountain shadows using the same colours that I was using during the blocking in stage, but I also mix in a little bit of quinacridone magenta. For some of the areas of reflected light, I've still used ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, but used a little bit more titanium white. And this reflected light is just going to help to give some more definition to the mountain. I had to do a bit of a value adjustment to the areas that are in the full sunlight on the side of the mountain, and it's again using the same colours that I used during the blocking in stage, keeping the value light and making sure that the chroma of the colour is low. I've made the mountain a more pale yellow-green colour lower down, and more of a straw colour in the upper section of the mountain. Following that, I then started painting some darker areas within the mountain to paint the suggestion of cracks in some of those rocks in the side of the mountain, and also waterways that are snaking down the slopes of the mountain. I used a number 3 Filbert brush to paint the surface of the water that's reflecting the sky and the clouds. I've used the same colours I used during the blocking in stage, mostly a mix of ultramarine blue, yellow oxide, cobalt teal and titanium white, but I've made the value a lot lighter. And I'm working around the ripples and the waves. So as I said before, think of those waves as little hills, and then the smoother areas of water, especially in the troughs of the waves, are going to be reflecting the sky and clouds. Once I've filled this area in, I then use a 1/4 inch synthetic dagger brush to start painting some highlights on the rocks, and this is mostly a mix of titanium white with some burnt umber. Synthetic dagger brushes are great for painting rocks because you can get some real sharp edges with them. The synthetic hairs hold their shape much better than bristles do. Now once again at this point of the painting I needed to let it dry so that I could add further details to it. I needed to spend a bit of time building up the form and definition of this mountain, so it needed a few highlights and the suggestion of some detail in there. I've painted more reflected light in the mountain, and I've still used ultramarine blue with burnt sienna and titanium white, but with a bit more burnt sienna in the mix. I've even added a little cobalt teal in the lower section of the mountain that's in shadow. And this just helps to create texture within the mountain. By this point in the painting I've got a good solid base to work from, and it's now just a question of adding more details and highlights to the painting. So I finish up these clouds by just adding a few final highlights to them, and again this is titanium white with some burnt sienna. and then just tidying up those cloud shapes overall. I'm able to use that cloud highlight mixture to start painting some more highlights on the white water that's in the foreground. But I'm still keeping it a bit dark because I'm going to be saving my lightest values until the end of the painting. I'm adding finer detail to the mountains, painting a bit of snow in the distant mountains, and this is titanium white with a little burnt sienna mixed in and a small amount of ultramarine blue, and that's to make it sit back in the painting because I really don't want that snow jumping forward. I'm adding more reflected light in the water as well, just little details here and there, only this time I've shifted it more on the blue side as it's reflecting some of the sky. When it comes to painting more of the white water in the foreground, I'm now using much smaller brushes. I'm using a number 0 round brush to paint some finer detail. I'm also using that same brush to paint a few highlights on the rocks as well, and this is going to make it look like it's wet and reflecting the direct sunlight. I use a bristle dagger brush and a number 0 round brush to paint some of those final highlights on the white water. And this is titanium white with a small amount of yellow oxide mix in, which just warms up the white. I finish up the painting by painting in a few seagulls, which provides a secondary focal area in the painting. Now you wouldn't think you'd get seagulls in a place like Queenstown, but you do. They're not as mean as the seagulls that you get in southwest England that will quite literally swipe a pasty out of your hand whilst you're eating it, but they certainly do dine very well in Queenstown. So it was at this point that I decided the painting was complete. Then once it was dry, I chucked it in its frame and I think it looks pretty good. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, feel free to leave me a comment in the comments section below. Now if you'd like to learn more about painting, then check out the painting resources I have on my website at samuelearp.com. I've lots of free written painting tutorials that you can copy and also use the reference photos that I've provided. And also I have full-length painting tutorial videos for sale from my website. Now you can also get instant access to all of those painting videos by subscribing to me on Patreon for just $5 a month. As I say, you get instant access to all of my full-length painting tutorial videos and a new painting tutorial video every month. And I've put the link in the description box below. Now if you'd like to see what artworks I'm working on at the moment, then you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and also my other website samuelearpfineart.com, which is there just to showcase my paintings. This website was built on the Portfolio Box platform at portfoliobox.net, so if you're looking to make your own website, don't forget that they're offering a 50% discount on any of their plans for the first year simply by typing in the discount code SAMEARP50, and I've put all the links in the description box below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I shall see you in the next video.